I miss the old Kanye, straight from the gold Kanye, chop up the soul Kanye. I miss the old Kanye, straight from the gold Kanye, chop up the soul Kanye. I miss the old Kanye, straight from the gold.
Was good, y'all? Beatgenerals.com back with a brand new tutorial. In this tutorial, I want to change things up a little bit and get away from the whole trap and ambient sound that we've been covering lately. So I created this much more organic hip-hop type beat influenced by Kanye West. The idea behind this track was just to create something more old school sounding that wasn't so digital or trapped out like most stuff can be these days. The sample that you hear in the track is actually all original and comes from the class reunion pack from studiosounds.com. We designed that pack with real live musicians, and the goal was to create the old school type of feel of soul samples everyone loves, but still keep it all original to not have to deal with all the copyright and clearance issues that come with sampling someone else's work. The sample that I actually picked is pretty simple compared to everything else that's kind of in there, but we'll work up to the more complex stuff over the next couple weeks. I included all the sounds I used in this beat for my VIP members in the VIP kit, as well as a few extra all original samples that you can go and flip on your own, so definitely make sure you grab that right now. Without further talking, let's go ahead and jump to the beat.
I miss the old Kanye, straight from the gold Kanye, chop up the soul Kanye.
So this is the actual sample I started with. As you can tell, all the samples in here are going to be marked for the actual BPM as well as the key. So it's 90 BPM, C sharp, and it's just a nice little piano loop. Like I said, this is one of the more of the simple ones that are in the pack, but I included a couple more for you guys. But here's what it sounds like right now before we do anything to it. So it just has a cool old school humanized type feel, and it's just catchy. It's not overdone. It's just perfect for kind of a base to a track or a foundation to a track. So basically what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and set this to 4 bars. If you guys kind of paid attention to that, it's actually an 8-bar loop. It's not a 4-bar loop. But basically when we set to 4 bars, here's what it sounds like. Now, FL Studio doesn't give you the option to go ahead and set this to 8 bars. So the way you kind of work around that is basically you want to go into your playlist, make sure that this little stretch is on. And if you don't see this little menu, just make sure you click your little WAV file and then you'll see this pop up. Now you'll use this little stretch feature to go ahead and basically just double up the size. So we can see it takes up 4 blocks, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we want to go ahead 5, 6, 7, 8, just double it up. And now this is what we have. Okay, now keep in mind, like I told you guys, these are live musicians, so this is going to be a little bit more of a humanized feel, so it's not going to be super on the grid, but that's going to give us that bounce and just that kind of humanized old school feel that was a lot more popular in the early 2000s and the early Kanye stuff, versus it's really not that popular now. But anyway, so this is kind of the beginning. I have my BPM set to 172. We're actually working in double time, so the BPM for this is actually 86, a little bit slower than the 90. But anyway, so this is where the track started. Let's jump to the next section. I'll show you guys what I added next. So the next thing that I actually did was just imported a little drum loop. This class reunion pack has a bunch of stuff, as you guys can see, everything from bass loops, drum loops, effects, instrument loops, one shots, drums, instruments, synths, vocals, all kinds of different stuff in here, soul loops, synth loops. But the pack that I actually went with was in 30, and this is just this little drum loop. It just had a kind of organic type sound that matched the piano. It wasn't quite as bright. And you have all kinds of stuff in here, so it just kind of depends on your taste. So they're great if you just want to chop them, if you want to loop them. And the instruments are the same way. The instrument loops, they're all labeled and just easy to grab from if you want to loop them. Like I said, if you want to just chop them up, if you want to sample them. So there's all kinds of stuff to just kind of spark ideas and get you going. But anyway, like I said, this is what I picked. And the first thing I'm going to do is stretch it to 4 bars, generic again. And then we're going to do the exact same thing. Just go ahead and stretch it to the full length of the loop. And here's what these two together kind of sound like. So those two loops just kind of play well off each other to build a nice foundation. Still has a nice organic feel. Neither of them are too bright, so just the perfect foundation to start building on. So let's jump to the next section. I'll show you guys what I added. So the next thing that I actually added to this was just this very simple organic type clap, and this is one of the one-shot samples from the class reunion pack. And instead of using this kind of like how most people would just layer with a snare, I decided to actually kind of make a more percussive element with it. So what I did was I just went ahead and filled each 4 steps like this, and I just removed the last step, kind of like that. And when you kind of add this to the track, you guys will kind of hear what it sounds like right now. Then we'll have to make some changes. Okay, so that doesn't sound bad, but it's a little bit distracting. Doesn't sound that great either. So what I did was I went in here and I started looking for different quantized settings that would kind of emulate a little bit more of a live kind of type feel, like a live drummer, or even just a live person kind of clapping their hands. They're obviously never going to clap 100% on the grid like this is when you program in FL Studio. So I went ahead and hit Alt and Q. And I picked this 16 raga setting, made sure that the velocity was up, everything was pretty much turned up. And when you add this is what it sounds like. So just a very little slight push off the grid. As you could tell, this would be 100%, and as you can tell, they're just all slightly moved over. But this just kind of helps emulate that drum pattern, and you could actually go in here and if you wanted to and really kind of sync whatever all the other drums that we're going to do directly to that drum beat. But me personally, I kind of like the difference that you get with your drums being just slightly different than the actual drum loop you're using. That kind of back and forth between your kicks and the snares, I just kind of find that interesting, and it kind of helps thicken it up. So I personally am not going to try to fully emulate the swing that the drum loop has, but you can if you'd like to. But anyway, like I said, this was just a little percussive element, kind of adds a cool little pattern to it. And you guys can see kind of how that sounds a lot different compared to what it originally sounded like, which would be this. So that quantize really does do a big 180 on the sound, in my opinion. In my opinion, that clap just really helps with that head nod. So let's go ahead and just copy and paste it. So if you want to just copy and paste something quick, select it by holding Control, which will let you select it. Then just hold Shift and you can just go ahead and drag your new patterns. Just save yourself a little bit of time. But anyway, we have that down. Let's go ahead and jump in the next section, continue layering. So the next thing I want to do is go ahead and lay down kind of the drum pattern that helps kind of tie it together. So while we have this drum pattern, I think it sounds good. I want it to be slightly thicker, so I added 2 different sounds, a kick and a snare to this. And basically the kick is right here, and here's the snare. So a much more organic sound than I'd ever use, but at that time this was kind of what's popular. So what we'll do is go ahead and just lay the snare in as usual. So we have this. And then we can actually just go ahead and lay this kick down. It's pretty simple. So it's basically just kind of this. So we're basically just kind of repeating what the drum loop was doing. So let's go into the piano roll, hit Alt and Q. And we're going to use this again, this little raga setting, accept. And we'll have to adjust the levels, but here's what it sounds like now when we add that second loop in there. So that sounds pretty good. As you can tell, that drum pattern, even though if you just kind of hear it initially, you don't really notice a huge difference. When you take it out, you can really tell when it's gone. The one thing I am going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set this kick to a free mixer channel, put in parametric EQ, and cut a little bit of that top end just so it doesn't stick out as much as it does. So let's go ahead and take a listen to it, and then we'll adjust as needed. All right, so that sounds pretty good to me. Nothing really difficult about that. Just make sure you kind of stay on top of your quantize when you're playing with a sample. You can always, most samples actually, depending on what you sample, they're obviously going to be a little bit more old school when people weren't using as much electronic stuff. So sometimes it could be a little bit tough to kind of copy what the actual drummer did if you sample something that has a drum track in it. But if you kind of utilize the quantize like I just did and kind of play with the different quantize, you can pretty much match most drum patterns and get pretty close just playing with the quantize. But if you leave it on the grid, you're going to run into issues with things just not really lining up. So keep that in mind. But that pretty much does it for the main drums for this. This was a much simpler era back then where you could kind of get away with simple stuff like this as well. So let's go and jump in the next section. Continue.
I miss the old Kanye, straight from the gold Kanye, chop up the soul Kanye.